How many people, hands up in this room, felt that bout of loneliness during these past 2 years, knowing what you do, and you felt it at your core? You know, if we look at what has transpired and the lessons, and there's thousands of lessons in this room, I believe one of the greatest lessons that we have learned is that pandemics, they do not change your identity, they reveal it. And we learned firsthand that human connection isn't an option, it is a necessity. I mean, this challenge of loneliness existed well before the pandemic even began. According to Cigna, the US health research firm, 1 in 4 Americans said they had no close friends. The latest data shows 58% of Americans identify as being lonely. And if we look at what that is costing companies, some of the data shows the real cost of loneliness, which is driving stress-related absenteeism, costing companies $154 billion annually. So what can we do? How can we spark these meaningful conversations that will build connection and have that connection build trust and have that trust lead to deeper engagement, higher productivity, and enhance the collaboration we can have, especially in this hybrid reality we are now living through? Well, before we look forward at some of the habits of human connection that will help you engage, I believe it's important that we all take a moment to reflect and look back. You know, when I looked at the MPI meetings Outlook report, and it said the 2 driving factors that will determine attendance at events in this era, networking and the ability to have spontaneous conversations. Well, we're going to do that right now. Because if I were to ask you, what is the most important conversation of your life that brought you to the point you're at today, what would it be? Huge question, I know. But since we're at the tables, here's what we're gonna do. Doug, if we can get the house lights up, we're gonna take 2 minutes. I invite you to partner up and share a defining conversation, something that was transformative, shifted your perspective, but got you to this point you're at today. We'll give you 2 minutes. The floor is yours. Quick show of hands. How many of these conversations that you shared, they were with friends or loved ones? If that was you, hands up, hands up. Okay, how many of this was a work conversation that you had? A work conversation, okay. And how many of you were inspired with the conversation your partner shared? Hands up, hands up. Okay, I love this question because everyone's looking at their partner like, put your hand up. She gave you the goods. You know, this question is such a reminder that each and every one of us, through our words, we have the power to teach, inspire, or destroy a person. But the right words at the right time can truly, truly be life-changing. You know, when we look at the opportunity to re-engage in meaningful ways now as we come back, one of the big ideas I want to introduce to you today is how we show up for each other and how we can be assertively empathetic. You know, if we want to connect, if we want to make our small talk bigger, how can we lean in these moments that matter most? You know, I credit the late, great psychiatrist Gordon Livingston for his work on the happiness equation. I mean, I think about the opportunity for us to connect this week. Maybe you're meeting somebody for the first time. What if you have no context of the person in front of you? How can we lean in with empathetic curiosity? And Livingston's work on the happiness equation found the happiest people have 3 things in common. They have something to do, they have someone to love, and they have something to look forward to. That's our starting point. Becoming masters of eliciting positive emotion. Asking about their reality. Asking about the stories and emotion that they have worked through. You know, when I think about my most important conversation, one of them that stands out took place in February of 2020, and it was with the lead counselor of Canuck Children's Hospice. I want to show you this photo. This is my family. They're my parents, my older brother, and my wife, Lori. In the past 2 years, I lost both of my parents unexpectedly. Both were 911 calls. We lost both after they went into cardiac arrest. And as you can imagine, these were the most difficult moments of my life. And as I share this, I know I am not alone, because in this room, chances are somebody just lost someone, or is about to lose someone, or you know someone coping with grief and loss. And maybe you don't even know how to lift them up when they need it most. Because for some, we've been grieving the loss of the way we used to live our lives. And in some extreme, you may have lost a loved one. And in February of 2020, I was 4 months removed from losing my father. I'd never dealt with grief, and I was struggling with this moment. And I volunteer with Canuck Children's Hospice because I think the work they do with lifting parents up that have faced the unimaginable circumstance of having lost a child is incredible. Their work is incredible. And what do we do in these uncomfortable conversations? We're in autopilot mode. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thoughts and prayers. Let me know if you need anything. And then we retreat. And that person's left all alone. And when I was at this event with this lead counselor, Deb, I said to her, what's the best thing you can say to somebody that is struggling profoundly? And she said, Riaz, it isn't about what you can say, it is about what you can ask. And I said, what is the best question you could ask someone? And she said, ask them this. What do you want me to know about them? What do you want me to know about them? This question, this empathetic curiosity is such a beautiful invitation for someone to share a piece of that person's legacy. Their story, their moment. And ever since that gift, that question was given to me, every single person I've reached out to when I know they have lost somebody, I've asked them this question. And they've given me a beautiful glimpse of their humanity, followed by 2 words. Thank you. What a special moment for all of us to be back together. And as Brian mentioned, after 20 years of interviewing people for a living, I can share the 3 most common questions that I've observed that we all ask ourselves. The first time we meet someone, or do you care about me? Are you listening to me? And can I trust you? And the value of these 3 questions became apparent in one of the first big interviews I ever had to do with MTV, and it was with this man, master illusionist David Copperfield. Because when I walked into the room, the hotel room in Vancouver, they said to me, hey, you're going to be David's last interview. You're his 10th of the day. Yeah. So I knew walking in, he would have been asked the same questions over and over. He would have been tired, and I'd have to do something a little extra to make this memorable for him. And as the interview started, the clock was ticking, and I'm just getting one-word answers. This conversation's going nowhere. And David is completely bored. And at this point, I realized I got to ditch the script and just talk about what David cares about. So I saw David had just bought some property in the Bahamas, so I asked him about this. And then it's like a spark lights up in his eye, and he starts talking about his love of the Bahamas. Next thing you know, we start sharing our mutual love of hip-hop music, and truth be told, 90s hip-hop R&B guy stuck in a bubble, not coming out anytime soon. David starts rapping 50 Cent in the interview. I mean, it wasn't good, but I'm not going to tell him that. One thing leads to another. I get the rap cue from the producer, and I look at David and I say, hey, man, you were a lot of fun. If only we had more time, I'd take you out on the town. We go out, we do it right. Interview ends. And I'm thinking, okay, I think that went all right. And I'm looking down, and all of a sudden I hear David's booming voice saying, well, Riaz, I'm here for 2 nights. Could we go out this evening? And I'm pretty sure his assistant saw the bewildered look on my face, and she said, David's not joking. He would like to go out this evening. And I said, yeah, man, sure. And then David asked the next logical question someone of his stature would ask. He said, now, Riaz, do we have transportation? And look, this interview was 20 years ago. When you're in your early 20s, you're proud of the car you drive. So I said, I got a 1990 Honda Accord, man. You can ride shotgun. And David said, great, I look forward to it. And I looked at him, I said, me too. So I go to David's show. He jumps in the Honda afterwards, and we end up at a local lounge in downtown Vancouver, sitting at a round table like the one you're at, and this is when I realized this man lives in a bubble. Like, how many of us talk about the fact that leadership is lonely at the top? Because sometimes the more success we have, people see us as a title or entity, and they forget to see us as a person. And I got really curious in this moment, just watching how exhausted he was, fielding these questions from the people that were at the table. And I just looked at him, I said, Dave, look, you've got all the fame and fortune any entertainer could ever ask for. Would you say you are happy as a person? And I'll never forget this, because David was in mid-sip of his drink. He hears the question, he puts his drink down, and then he just stares at me. Silence. And he said, you know what? No one's really asked me this before. He said, I do 200 shows a year. I'm always on the road. Sometimes I question who my true friends are, and my relationship just fell apart. He said, I struggle with it. And in this moment, so early on in my career, I was so grateful for this moment, because when we look at the opportunity for meaningful human connection, real connection isn't about perfection. Real connection is our ability to open up and admit imperfection. How many of you, when you think about this imperfection, I mean, this aspect of loneliness, how many of you in this room in the past 2 years felt this firsthand at your core? The stress, anxiety, and depression with isolation and loneliness as we navigated through 2 years of uncertainty. Or maybe you saw it with your teens. Hands up. Any one of us can feel lonely. Even a world-famous illusionist. And when we look at the challenge that exists, and now our opportunity to talk about it, the research is profound. Cigna found annually in the US alone, loneliness is costing companies $154 billion annually, and lost productivity due to stress-related absenteeism. Lonely workers, twice as likely to take a sick day compared to connected workers. 5 times as likely to miss work due to stress. And thanks to research by Professor Julianne Holt-Lunstead, the physical equivalent of chronic loneliness can be the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's killing us. And some of you might think, okay, look, I'm in this hybrid reality, I'm really busy, connection's cool, but I've got other things to do. If we don't make time for prioritizing connection, we're gonna have to make time for misunderstandings. Because research shows 90% of the time, we think we're crystal clear when we send that text or email, yet 50% of the time, that message gets misunderstood. So how can we get intentional with human connection? Because the quality of our questions will determine the depth of our connections. And those connections with consistent effort can become high-trust relationships. And those relationships will drive engagement and retention. Those relationships will allow us to collaborate effectively across silos, and those relationships will allow us to do one important thing: outcare the competition. And if you're wondering, well, where do we start? Before we look forward, I believe it is so important to take a moment and look back. And if I were to ask you, what is the most important conversation of your life that brought you to the point you're at today, what would it be? Huge question, right? Huge question. Maybe this was a conversation with a loved one. Maybe it was a mentor that leaned in and shared something with you. Share this in the breaks, the defining conversation. Because anyone that begins to answer this, you understand who they are, where they've been, and where they're trying to go. And as we reflect on this, we understand we all have the power with our words to teach, inspire, or destroy a person. Because the right words at the right time can be life-changing. And if we want to make more of our conversations count and make these conversations memorable, there is a massive opportunity for all of us to lead with assertive empathy and discover before we dismiss. You know, I think about your reality when you're working with meeting planners and they may say, I need a speaker for this event, and you've got this catalog of a list you can send them. But what if we led with empathy and asked the questions, well, what do you need now that you don't already have? What needs to be challenged with their mindset? What needs to be celebrated so we can understand greater ways we can serve? I think about the difficult conversations when conflict is inevitable, and conflict can be a great thing to achieve new outcomes, new creative outcomes. And sometimes we get in our own heads of how difficult it can be. What if we led with that sense of empathy, and we have to give feedback? Hey, before I give you that critique, I'm going to replace my criticism with empathetic curiosity. Hey, how do you feel that went? Maybe they're stuck. What do you feel is impossible right now? Well, what would make it possible? And give them that reframe. And then lead in with that sense of empathy. Hey, look, what's the question I failed to ask to understand your reality? And how could I show up for you in bigger ways? And slowly, that person will begin to realize, oh, this is the two of us versus the challenge. This isn't me versus you. And when we've prioritized that relationship, we can begin to focus on what we agree on. And then lean in with that curiosity, even when they're differing opinions. Hey, Brandon, what does your ideal scenario look like? Carl, what's the real challenge here for you? Josh, what would it take for this to work for you? And then we can turn these confrontations into collaborations. But this takes courage for each and every one of us. Coming out of these past 2 years, the courage to ultimately go first in our conversations. Because if we want to motivate our meeting planners, let's go first and find out what motivates them and then help them achieve that. If we want to create a safe space for our teams, what if we went first and shared a bit of our vulnerability so they know this is a safe space to do the exact same? They might not respond right away, but that consistent gesture will allow them to know that they can count on you. And ultimately, with our conversations, what if we went first with the courage and humility to ask for help? Because as we've heard this morning, burnout is a big factor. Well-being is a massive factor. This takes a great deal of courage and trust to say to somebody, hey, I'm here for you, but I also know I trust you, and you can do the exact same for me. You know, one of the most important conversations in my life took place in February of 2020, and it was with the lead counselor from Canuck Place Children's Hospice. This woman's name is Deb Davison, and she has a heart of gold. I want to share why this conversation was so important. This is a photo of my family. There's my beautiful wife, Lori, my older brother, Zane, and there's mom and dad. In the last 3 years, we lost mom and dad unexpectedly. Both situations were 911 calls. Both passed after complications with cardiac arrest. And as you can imagine, these are some of the most difficult moments you'll ever experience that nothing can prepare you for. And as I share this, I know I am not alone, because chances are there's somebody in this room or on this live stream that just lost someone. There's someone here that's about to lose someone, or maybe you know somebody coping with grief and loss, and you want to help, but you don't know what to do. Because what do we all do when the conversations get uncomfortable? We're in autopilot mode. The intention's pure, but we run the script. Hey, I'm so sorry for your loss. Thoughts and prayers. Let me know if you need anything. And then we step back, and that person's left all alone. And in this conversation in February of 2020 with Deb Davison, I was 4 months removed from the sudden loss of my father, and I was struggling. And I realized I had failed everybody that had ever experienced loss until I experienced it myself. And I said, Deb, help me. What is the best thing you can say to somebody that is grieving? Because her work to lift parents up that have faced the unimaginable circumstance of having lost their child blows my mind. And she looked at me and she said, Riaz, it isn't about what you can say, it's about what you can ask. And I said, Deb, what's the best question we could ask someone? And she looked me straight in the eye and she said, Riaz, ask them this. What do you want me to know about them? What do you want me to know about them? This question is such a beautiful, beautiful invitation for someone to share a story, a moment, a bit of that person's legacy, their relationship. And I can tell you, every single person I have posed this question to, after this gift was given to me that I give to you today, has then opened up with a beautiful glimpse of their humanity, followed by 2 words. Thank you. This is what we need right now. This human connection to lift each other up. You talk about the future of work, it starts with the intention of forging deeper human connections. And not only lifting people up in their darkest time, but also finding creative ways to celebrate them. And when you look at that opportunity, we all in our conversations have the opportunity to make people feel famous. And I do not mean this in a superficial way. Because what do we do when we see something we like sometimes? We're moving so fast. Hey, great job. But what does it really mean? How did that action truly impact you? How could you practice specificity with your praise? I think about the gifts we've been given today with Sunil, with the 4 C's. And the reminder that long-term success comes from short-term embarrassment. Thank you for that gift. I think of our MC today, Peter Katz, reminding us of the power of music to bring us all together and connect on just a human level. Thank you, Peter. And I think of this awesome showcase with Anthony and Heather and Brian Walter, reminding what a joyful collaboration could look like in a showcase like this. How can we make our praise specific? How can we make it urgent and not waiting till the next big ISB Engage convention? But above all, how can we make it purposeful and let that person know that action connects to the greater good and you are making a difference? Because if we do this, Heather talked all about listening today. If we are paying attention, Anthony talks about the intention of making shift happen. If we are observing all of these factors in somebody's life, we then have the opportunity to create milestone moments that emphasize their significance. Because at the end of the day, what does every meeting planner want to do? They want to create unforgettable experiences. The late psychologist William James talks about this, that the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated. And this lesson of appreciation was something I learned from Canadian icon Rick Hansen. For those that don't know, Rick is a celebrated philanthropist, decorated Paralympian, and in his teen years, he was thrown from a pickup truck and paralyzed from the waist down. To this day, he says that moment was both the worst but best day of his life because it defined his purpose to create a world accessible by all. And on March 21st, 1985, he embarked on what is known as the Man in Motion Tour. He wheeled around the world, 34 countries, 26,000 miles, $26 million raised for his cause, and he hasn't stopped since. Incredible. And I remember this story because when I was younger, Mom would come home from work and she'd turn on the news and she said, Riaz, I want you to pay attention to what this man is doing. This is what making a difference is all about. And in 2012, Rick and his team decided they wanted to retrace the Man in Motion Tour journey all across Canada from east to west and re-inspire that spark behind his profound purpose. So they reached out for volunteers and ambassadors to participate. And they reached out to our team ahead of time. May 22nd, 2012 was the final day. They reached out to our team at Breakfast Television Vancouver for a volunteer that could run in this anniversary relay, and my hand shot way up. And I was lucky to be the chosen one to represent our show and do this, but that wasn't the important part. Because when Rick and his team realized it would be me, the conversation shifted. And they asked, how do you like the idea of handing off that anniversary relay medal to Mom when you're done your portion of the relay? And I smiled because I remember those conversations I had with Mom when I was younger, but more importantly, Rick and his team remembered that Mom worked in the accounting department of the Man in Motion tour back in the 80s. So this played out on live television. And I remember running down Hastings Street in downtown Vancouver beside Rick, watching people come to the route and just salute him to thank him. And I had goosebumps thinking, I get to be a part of this. But then I looked straight ahead. And I saw Mom smiling big. Because you know she jumped at the chance to do this when I put out this ask. And when I finished my portion of the relay, I took that medal off and I put it around Mom's neck. And Rick saw me smiling, he saw Mom smiling, and he yelled out, "Wait!" And he raised her arm, and somebody captured this. This was his relay, but he made it about everybody else. I have never seen my mother smile so big. And I often wonder, as a parent, what is the greatest way we can say thank you to our parents? Rick created this moment. And like, God bless Mom's soul, she brought the Man in Motion tour book from the 80s. It had photos of the team members, and Rick looked at them and he said, "That's Barry, that's Edie, that's so-and-so." And I'm like, how do you possibly remember all of these people? And he said, "Riaz, if you can find a way to creatively celebrate your champions, you will cultivate a culture of loyalty in your life." Today I ask you, what is the most important conversation you've ever had? Well, I'll leave you with what's the most important conversation you have never had? Because maybe somebody gave you a helping hand when you struggled, a confidence boost when you stopped believing in yourself, or maybe a wake-up call when you deviated from your true purpose, and maybe that person has no idea. This is a huge moment for all of us in this room, and I invite you all to leave this space and start with one. In the next 24 hours, start with one. Reach out to one person. Go first. Lead with that empathetic curiosity so that person feels valued and seen. But above all, do the work so you can celebrate them and make them feel famous. Every conversation is a chance to build a real connection with someone, and that connection could make, change, or save someone's life. And when you do this, don't hold back. Because whether you realize it or not, the people in your life, they may be looking to you for more than you think. ISB, my name is Riaz Meghji. Thank you so much for listening to this message here today. Thank you.